Welcome back. Panelists here, syndicated columnist George Will, whose latest book is The Conservative Sensibility. Helene Cooper, Pentagon correspondent for The New York Times. Danielle Pletka of the American Enterprise Institute. And Mark Leibovich, chief national correspondent for The New York Times Magazine. Welcome, everybody. I want to combine two thoughts here, George. We have election interference and what the president said at first, and then he backtracks it. But I want to read you something James Hohmann wrote on Friday that also had to do with the Hatch Act. Decision by the president. President Trump's announcement this morning that he will not punish White House counselor Kellyanne Conway for repeatedly violating the Hatch Act captures in miniature his apparent belief that the rules don't apply to him and his loyalists the way they do everyone else. It seemed to me that both of these stories are connected in that if he thinks it's small and petty and has nothing to do with him or it helps him, ignore it.
Article 2 is remarkably spare in describing the duties of the president, and basically they come down to taking care that the laws are faithfully executed. There's evidently an asterisk over that says the Hatch Act doesn't apply. But with regard to...
By the way, didn't the president just repeal it? If he doesn't act, he's repealed it.
Well, yes, it's called, presidents do this, they call this enforcement discretion.
Yes.
That their enforcement mechanisms are spread thin, something like that. With regard to the election interference, when Speaker Pelosi says he doesn't know right from wrong, she's right to this extent. He's a complete amateur in American public life, and the rules and norms are mysterious to him. Besides, he campaigned on the promise, we knew this promise was going to be kept, that he would continue to do what he did in the campaign, which was violate all existing norms. So no one should be appalled if you wish, but don't be surprised.
Not surprising at all.
The problem in Washington is that Donald Trump takes what are, I think, norms and runs with them. The Hatch Act is violated every single day in multiple ways. I mean, I spent 10 years on the Hill. I can't count the number of times I saw senators, their staff, violating the Hatch Act because, you know, its strictures are rather inconvenient. You can't do political business from your Senate office, for example. So if you want to call a donor or anything else, you've got to leave. You've got to go elsewhere. And so, of course, it gets violated. The problem with Trump is that he has taken what is sort of a bandwidth and just, you know, tossed it all out and said, and taken it to the logical end, which is violating it.
Yeah. The thing is, though, that norms are things that are essentially respected within a very, very small bubble, which is basically Washington. The public life. Most people in America don't know what the Hatch Act is, and they would, well, not only they, well, I don't know if they care or not, but they would say, well, wait, isn't Kellyanne Conway supposed to defend the president and supposed to attack his? I mean, there's a level of common sense that I think the president does align with that does win over a lot of his supporters.
And yet he's chipping away at all these things, and they're the little ones. And the unintended consequence of all this could be, come November, that the losing side, no matter who it is, doesn't believe the result.
I think that's absolutely true. I think that, I mean, it's not just the Hatch Act. I cover the military, so I pay a lot of attention to, you know, Trump as a commander in chief, and he has gone so far on the whole, you know, violating this whole principle of not politicizing the military. That, you know, the whole thing with the USS McCain back in Tokyo when he was in Yokosuka when he was visiting last month was another example of this. And when you have this sort of thing repeatedly, I wonder what happens to us, you know, once Trump is gone, and what happens when you've taken so many of these accepted norms and ways of conducting ourselves, and how does the next person?
Yeah, I have no idea how you bring it back. I guess maybe they will introduce more codified laws. Let me turn a little bit to the president's political prospects. He's launching his re-election campaign on Tuesday. Those infamous Trump-Biden polls, well, we got our hands on pretty much all of them. Let me show you them and why the president didn't like that they went public as much. Here is Virginia, Maine, Minnesota, Michigan. As you can see, hit 40's the best he does in any of those states with Biden, and these are all just Biden-Trump matchups. They tested everybody, but Biden was the strongest. And look at Biden's numbers there. Now look at this. North Carolina, Iowa, Ohio. These were all three states that Trump carried. He's down 8 in North Carolina, 7 in Iowa. Ohio just won. I think that tells you a little bit more about where Ohio's headed. There, we also had in Texas, Trump was only up 2. In Georgia, our source tells us that Biden is up 6. and he had double-digit leads in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Florida. By the way, the campaign didn't dispute the numbers. Campaign manager Brad Parscale gave us this quote: "All news about the president's polling is completely false. The president's new polling is extraordinary, and his numbers have never been better." My colleague Kristen Welker is now reporting right now, we're breaking that apparently the Trump campaign is going to be firing some pollsters, believing they were behind this leak. George, these numbers aren't surprising to me.
No, shooting the messenger isn't surprising either.
Yeah.
In fact, there are worse numbers for him in the sense that in a dozen states that he carried in 2016, his disapproval is over 50%. Those are states he carried. So if you have to bet your net worth on the outcome of the next election, bet on anybody but Mr. Trump.
But do we believe the polls?
Oh, wow.
No.
Well,
Sorry,
the president
but
doesn't.
Well, no, I'm just saying after 2016, I'm just not entirely sure that this soon in the game we should be paying any attention to any of this.
Except the president pays a lot of attention to this, which that is what is sort of, is he can't never let them, he never wants to show weakness.
But a poll that where he's flatlined is that band between 42% and 46%.
Right.
It's not early to say that now almost 2 years of this, that represents his floor and his ceiling.
Well, here's a bigger problem. It's not just that. So the ballot test, the job number, and his personal rating are all aligning. Usually, a successful reelected president has one of those as an outlier in a positive way, either a winning personality or they like the agenda but don't like the person. He doesn't have that.
But right now, there's no choice. It's do you like Donald Trump or don't you like Donald Trump? And a generic Democrat, and he's going to run against a real person.
Well, this was against a real Joe Biden.
Well, no, but Joe Biden, I think, is a stand-in for a generic Democrat in this case. And he'll be
he will represent that remark. Yeah.
Well, I mean, look, he's someone people know, right? I mean, people know what they're getting with him. So he will be defined. But I mean, look, if he goes against Elizabeth Warren, against Pete Buttigieg, it's a whole different dynamic in the race.
It is. All right. We'll see. The president, I have a feeling they're going to release new poll numbers that show just him winning.
Better pollsters.
Winning. Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here, and then click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.